The Greek premier has called for the urgent resettlement of thousands of stranded refugees to other European countries ahead of a crucial EU emergency summit.
Since the border between Greece and Macedonia is close to refugees and the flow from the Turkish shores to the islands is continuing, it is to become completely clear that the immediate start of a process of relocation of refugees from our country to other states of the European Union is a matter of utmost urgency. And this is exactly what we will seek on Monday at the emergency summit.
Tsipras said the refugee crisis is rooted in the unreasonable interventions and cooperation in imperialistic conflicts by the Western states. He stressed that Greece seeks the obligation of all EU countries to the bloc's decisions on how to manage the refugee influx. His remarks come as Greece's neighboring Macedonia further tightened its border blockade, only allowing around 160 people through per day. The Greek government said there were over 33,000 refugees currently in the country, including over 6,000 on the islands facing Turkey. Turkey and the EU countries are now set to attend a crucial summit in Brussels on Monday over the worst refugee crisis to hit Europe since World War II. To get some insight, we're going to Brisbane, where we have Max Igan joining us. He's a radio host, basically, and a political commentator. Max, it's good to have you here on PressTV and the program. Now, what I want to ask you essentially is that Tsipras, he claims that the roots are essentially because of the West's intervention in various countries and imperialism. Those are indeed pretty strong words, aren't they?
Well, they are, and he's absolutely correct. The entire war in Syria is a result of imperialist interests of the West. It really is. And really, it's all of the European nations that have been supporting this war, and now it's coming back to bite them, as we expected it would do. And really, they can call for other European countries to take more refugees, but it's not really going to solve the problem. Most of the refugees actually would like to go home, and until they stop bombing Syria, it's just going to get worse. I mean, this is exactly the result of them bombing Syria, which has been a covert invasion from the ground up right since the beginning. I mean, Obama wanted to go in there years ago, and public outcry wouldn't let him. And so they constructed an entire situation in Syria, which basically allowed them to conduct a covert war to overthrow Assad, which hasn't worked out very well for them. And they need to see that this is a direct result of Western governments that caused this whole problem right from the beginning. And it's very predictable that this is exactly what would have happened. And I think he's making a lot of sense with what he's been saying.
Now, Max, what he also says, Tsipras that is that essentially he's seeking the compliance, if not cooperation of other EU states in terms of fulfilling their obligations when it comes to managing the refugee crisis. Now, what are exactly, if you can tell us, those obligations that he's referring to?
Well, it was supposed to be evenly drawn out across the board. I mean, we've got to see that the European Union is supposed to function as one body at the moment. And so when it faces a crisis which is directly affecting Europe as a whole, then that crisis is supposed to be spread out through the member nations, but we're not seeing that. We're seeing pockets of refugees, massive pockets of refugees being pushed into certain nations and like, okay, it's your problem, you take care of them. Well, we've got our own crisis and we'll just close our borders for now and not really let it happen the way it's supposed to. I mean, it's supposed to be an even democratic situation here where the EU acts responsibly as one body in the best interest of all, and it certainly isn't happening that way at all. You can even see within the structure of the EU, they have it's almost kind of a racial setup where they've got this hierarchical setup depending on what your country is, how European you really are, as to whether, you know, how many rights you're going to have. And of course we have countries like England sort of ruling the roost, even though the English people are getting sort of shafted by the EU as well. We have, you know, English Parliament basically designating a lot of what goes on there behind the scenes, and of course the banking interests and everything that controls Europe as well. But we haven't seen any even treatment with the construction of the European state at all. You know, we've seen a very, very hierarchical system that is not doing what it purported to be doing to the nations who joined it. They haven't got the deal that they expected to get anywhere along the line. And now we're seeing this crisis is just being fobbed off and kept in specific corners. And like I said, they're not going to really get any, even if they do bring it out and start fulfilling their obligations and even it up a little bit, it's not going to improve anything. The people want to go home, and until they stop bombing all these countries in the Middle East and conspiring to create this situation, which I believe has been created by design just to destabilise Europe, because that's what it's doing, and we all predicted this would happen. Until they stop doing that, they're not going to see any solution to this at all. So hopefully it will serve as a bit of a wake-up call for people. They really need to realise that they've got to stop supporting US and Israeli interests, because it's really not doing their countries any favours at all.
And Max, very briefly, clearly this situation of the refugee crisis in Europe is posing a major, clear and present threat and danger to the stability of the whole continent, for which this emergency summit is going to be taking place very soon. Now, what are your predictions? Are we going to finally be seeing some sort of a consensus being shaped around the issue, and what is it going to take for that to be achieved, actually?
Well, look, I don't think that we're going to see any real consensus formed. I mean, I think the nations are realising that just what they've got themselves into. Even the smaller nations that decide to go along with the will of Brussels and the countries that kind of conspired to make this happen. I think that people are basically going to freak out. They really are. They're going to see that this crisis is completely out of control. And personally, I think the only way we're going to see any sort of solution to it at all is to realise that there's a criminal element that's running these Western governments, and this criminal element needs to be taken out. They need to be arrested, and they need to be held accountable for their actions. And we need to roll back this fake war on terror, stop this invasion of Syria, and start spending some money reconstructing the country so these people can go home. I think that's the only solution we're going to see. I think this summit is just going to cause these leaders to see that their leadership is imploding, and they're not going to last very long, because Europe is not going to last very long if they continue to allow it to go the direction it's going.
Okay, Max Igan, I want to thank you for joining us tonight here on Top 5.